The Labour government of Helen Clark held power from 1999 to 2008. The Helen Clark government was in many ways a breath of fresh air. It was the first decent government that New Zealand had had in a long time. The previous three governments had been plagued by very serious issues and very bad policies. The Muldoon government was defined by terrible economic management and Muldoon's desire for total control. The Longy government was defined by brutal economic reform, constant infighting, lies and deceit. The Bolger government was defined by more brutal economic reform, more lying and more infighting. The Helen Clark government finally put an end to decades of chaos and stupidity. The Helen Clark government was by no means perfect, but it was moderate, pragmatic, professional, and orderly, something that previous governments had not been. Some bold policy was introduced. KiwiBank, KiwiSaver, the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, working for families. A raft of less significant reforms were also introduced. Some neoliberal policies were reversed, but the bulk of the neoliberal agenda remained in place, and economic transformation did not occur. But some changes were made around the edges to reduce the harshness of previous economic reforms. Notably, the government had Michael Cullen as a Minister of Finance. Michael Cullen is widely regarded as a superb Minister of Finance. He has attracted significant praise from both the left and the right. He managed to continually introduce budgets with a surplus. He created a special rainy day fund. He managed to maintain a surplus without introducing harsh austerity. In contrast, even most finance ministers on the right have failed to reliably deliver a budget surplus. Cullen delivered 9 budgets with a surplus in a row, more than any finance minister had in decades. Him and Helen Clark were a strong team. They secured strong public confidence. When they left politics, the Labour Party took years to recover. It was left with a gaping hole in its leadership. Helen Clark was a very effective politician. She won 3 elections in a row. No Labour leader has managed to do that before. It was the only time Labour has lasted 3 terms since the first Labour government. Helen Clark secured massive victories over National in 1999 and 2002. In 2005, she defeated Brash, saving the nation from his neoliberal politics. Even in 2008, when she was defeated by John Key, Helen Clark still performed better than the Labour Party did in the following 2 elections. It is often forgotten that Helen Clark lost her first election as leader in 1996. This is proof that losing one election does not have to be the end of a leader's career. Massive comebacks are possible. Jim Bolger also lost his first election and went on to win 3 victories for the National Party. One loss does not necessarily prove that a leader lacks potential. Notably, the Helen Clark government refused to participate in the invasion of Iraq. This aged very well, particularly since other Anglosphere nations, such as Australia and Britain, participated in the American invasion of Iraq. Helen Clark refused to be a mindless US stooge. This deserves great admiration, especially because it conflicted with dominant sentiments among the political class of many Anglosphere nations. The Helen Clark Labour government did some very good things. It was the best government in decades. Numerous good policies were passed, but the government did not do enough. Many necessary reforms were neglected. Many much-needed policies were not passed. The government failed to properly address the neoliberal agenda. Neoliberalism was watered down, but many neoliberal policies remained. Trade unions were very weak as a result of the policies of the previous national government. Workers' rights were not in a good place. Labour did address this, but they did not do anywhere near enough. Helen Clark's Labour government could have done a lot more. On Maori issues, the government was highly controversial. the Foreshore and Seabed Act, the Urewera raids. These events led many Maori to flee the Labour Party, resulting in the creation of the Maori Party. Helen Clark increasingly used antagonistic rhetoric towards Maori activists in an attempt at addressing concerns that her government was too pro-Maori. The Clark government is interesting. In some ways, I think the Helen Clark government belongs to a bygone age. It represents a moderate, professional, technocratic form of politics. A politics devoid of bold ideas and big personalities, a politics that fixates on professionalism and efficiency, competently managing the status quo without changing things too much. That is what the Helen Clark government represented. There are obvious parallels between Clark's government and the Blair government in the UK and the Clinton government in the US. They are not exactly the same, but they all represent a moderate, professional, third-way politics. In the modern world, this approach to politics is increasingly outdated. All over the world, people increasingly demand transformational change. Look at the recent victory of Donald Trump. Look at the success of more extreme minor parties during New Zealand's last election. Many people are moving away from the centre. They demand more extreme action. Technocratic third-way liberals struggle to provide this. They had their era. They were very successful in the 1990s and 2000s. But the 1990s and 2000s are over. The modern age increasingly demands a new form of politics. The modern Labour Party can learn some things from Helen Clark, but they should be careful to not learn too much.